Next in is from Greg Nicastro. I believe I'm saying that right. Got my glasses here. I think it's Greg Nicastro. Let me just double check. Yes, Greg Nicastro. A question about Dean Malenko. Shane, longtime fan of yours. Thank you. I think your ECW run showed everyone in WCW and WWE what they'd missed out on. I hope so. I also really enjoy you taking questions from the fans and having more about taking questions from the fans and learning more about your experience in wrestling. I have a question about Dean Malenko. He was a guy I just immediately became a fan by watching him wrestle. Yeah, you could with Dean. Dean was everything. Looked so natural, second nature to him. I agree. The Malenko Guerrero Classic doesn't seem to get the praise these days that I think it deserves. Yeah, that's honestly, as you wrote that, as I read the first part of that, I thought to myself, well, I mean, I haven't talked about that in a long time. You're right on that, Greg. Anyway, Dean's verbal skills were obviously not his strength. Years later, I hear so many stories about what a great personality he was backstage, similar to Brad Armstrong, a good analogy. What was it that just wasn't there for Dean when the camera was on? Thanks for your time and best of luck in your future, Greg. Good question. First of all, good guy. Dean was very proficient in the ring. And you've heard me on previous questions talk about guys like Lance Storm, outstanding in the ring, a little weaker on the mic or the characterizations. They bring in something more to that personality. Dean, I think, came from, much like Brad. Brad was raised in a family of wrestlers. He had grown up watching his father being one of the greatest wrestlers in the industry at that time, the Bullet Bob Armstrong. And he had grown up watching his father and his father's cohorts in the industry go out and do the babyface promo. I'm going to give 100%. I'm going to do this. But that was the standard then. The standard was for that babyface to go out there and look tough, look sincere, looked into the camera. And, what we know of wrestling today, what wrestling has become, much more overblown on the ego side, the personality side. Back then, wrestling was a very different beast. And those guys were taught. So like Dean and Brad Armstrong were almost carbon copies of each other, both incredibly proficient. Dean more on the ground attack, Brad more on the I don't want to say flying, but I always said to me when I watched Brad Armstrong to me looked like what if professional wrestling were real. In other words, the next extension of amateur wrestling, it would look exactly like Brad Armstrong. He just was elegant in the ring to watch. Dean, too. These guys then had a tendency, because of what they'd grown up watching. In Dean's case, Boris Malenko, the great, legendary Boris Malenko, and his older brother Joe, they grew up watching their father and their father's compatriots look into that camera and, go out and they're going to do the job and they're going to this and that. I think, in a way, they were victims of the business that their families had been in, going this way, and all of a sudden wrestling took a sharp left turn. And because of that, they couldn't reconcile, how to bring, because both of them, like Dean was quick with a quip, boom, 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 sharp as a tack. Brad was so gifted, joke teller, beatbox, rapper, dancing, singing, moonwalking, but then he'd go in front of that camera and go and give 100%. And I'm like, let that guy in the dressing room out. He's incredible, that guy. Can't take your eyes off of him. And I think Dean suffered from a lot of the same thing. Plus, because in Dean's case, certainly, he had become so entrenched on what he had grown up watching his dad do, and his dad becoming that larger than life name in the industry, that you'd have a tendency, much like Brad, to watch his dad Bullet become this huge star. That's how you do it. And I just don't think it's much like I always talk about the newspaper industry, right? When's the last time any of you read a newspaper? 30 years ago, 20 or 15 years ago, it would have been unthinkable if you had any editor of any newspaper sitting down here with me right now saying, hey, you know you're dead, right? Your newspapers are dead. They would look at you like you were nuts because they came up at a time where everybody, my dad read a newspaper twice a day. That's how the news got disseminated before all this technology. So I think Brad and Dean in very much the same way. They were victims of the fact that the world had changed. The industry had changed from what it had been in a lot of ways for the better, and in a lot of ways, maybe not for the better. And both of them, if they would have been able to, this is you hear me talk about my father all the time. These are larger than life figures to us. Most important man in my life would be my dad. And I think Dean and Brad saw their parents the same way. And so for them, it was really difficult to let go of what they'd grown up watching and loving. And in both of their cases, you can see how much they love the business because they're so damn proficient at what it is they do in the ring. But they just, for some reason, couldn't cross over that threshold of into the entertainment world. And one final point about that generation back then. Back then, it was all about the kayfabe. This is a sport, not an entertainment. And now, when's the last time you heard it called a sport? Now it's sports entertainment or entertainment. I just watched the video of Hulk Hogan doing the speech at the Republican National Convention. And he said the line, not verbatim, but I'm going to paraphrase. For the last X number of years, I've been an entertainer, but it's time for me to put the entertainer away and be Terry Bollea. Bruno would have never said that. But again, different industry. Not that Bruno's right and Hogan's wrong. Bruno was then, Hogan was now. Then, at the time frame when he spoke. So Dean and Brad, the same thing. And there's a lot of people in wrestling that do that, that come up. They get so tainted and so familiar with what it was they loved that they can't identify that the industry is, in this case, had done, like I said, a left-hand turn right off the page into something that Bullet wouldn't have recognized, Boris wouldn't have recognized, and certainly would not have been fans of. And so you can see like almost this dilemma in their own head, of what they've grown up loving and respecting and idolizing their parents, and getting into the business and now being told, sorry, the business has gone way over there. So you got to leave all that stuff behind and come way over here. Really hard to do because at no point in time is there there's no official, Greenwich Mean Time, right? To say, okay, at 12 o'clock midnight, boom, we officially go from that to this. It's just this sort of like slow transition. And I think for a lot of the time, a lot of us in the industry thought that Vince's version of the business would not succeed long term. We can get more, parse the letters and the words in that sentence if we want to. But when you're sitting in it, you have no way to know that 30 years down the road, there's going to be this thing called streaming. It would have been Star Trek or Star Wars at that time. And I think Dean and Brad both very much the same thing in the sense that they had grown up and watched their dads become huge stars doing that. Now you're telling me to do something else, and they're familiar with that. So I hope that answers it. I've never really spoke to Brad or Dean about that. But one of those guys that, this is not a negative comment for me. It's very much a positive comment. When you watch Dean, when I would watch Dean work, I would almost hear music in my head because it looked like a beautiful dance. Da 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 dun 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 da da. It was just perfect. It was smooth as silk. And like I said about Chris and Bamber before, Dean just made it look just simple. Go out there. Man of 1,000 holds, right? I think it's probably more than that, but he's being modest. Incredible in-ring performer, just like Brad Armstrong. Difficult for both of them, if not impossible, for them to just jettison what they'd seen their fathers become successful at. And you telling them, oh, hey, by the way, 20, 30 years down the road, the entertainment's going to really take over wrestling, and that's all going to be gone. They couldn't have imagined it. So, by the way, from what I've heard, I spoke to him afterwards. A couple years ago, a year and a half ago, Dean had a electrode put in to help with the shakes and everything, and I heard he's doing much better. So if Dean, you're listening out there, glad to hear that, brother. Hope you're doing well. And Greg, appreciate the question. Thank you so much.